Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Leadership Project, where our vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo. Familiar followers of the show will know that we take great pride in finding really innovative thought leaders to share with us their perspectives and to challenge our thinking. And today, we're in for a real treat in that regard. We are joined by Jon Mertz. Jon has had a very diverse career, starting in politics, but also working in high-tech, well-established engineering organizations, and also some time within startups. He's also the founder of an organization called Santa Fe Innovates, and he has a focus on the intersection between business and society, and has a view that business leaders are best positioned to be able to create real, sustainable, and meaningful impact on society. He's also on the advisory council for the Center for Leadership and Ethics with the McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas. I'm really interested to hear Jon's thoughts here today. We're going to have a chat about business leadership and the connection to purpose. Jon, without any further ado, please introduce yourself to the audience and give a little flavor of your background and what led you to be with us today.
Great. Mick, thank you so much for your time, and I really look forward to the conversation today. A little bit about my background. I kind of look at, or I've started looking at my life in kind of 3 chapters, so I'll kind of introduce myself that way. So my first chapter, I was very intrigued by politics, and as a 20-something-year-old, got involved in that, and which led me to working in Washington, D.C., in the United States Senate as a legislative assistant, and then an appointee in a couple of administrations as well. And that kind of led to kind of what's next, and that led to my chapter 2, which took me back to business school to get my MBA, and really led then to a focus on high tech over the course of 25 years. And I've led marketing and business development organizations for startups, and as well as leading teams for bigger companies like IBM and Deloitte. Third chapter started probably about 4 years ago, moved to Santa Fe, and kind of did a reset. Did 2 things. One, I started a doctoral program. So I'm right now in the dissertation phase of my interdisciplinary leadership doctorate. And the second thing I did, I got very involved in economic development projects and initiatives here in Santa Fe. And that led to about 1.5 years ago to starting Santa Fe Innovates. And the focus with Santa Fe Innovates is really to work with entrepreneurs here in northern New Mexico in particular, and focus on those entrepreneurs that want to make a difference, not only in the business that they build, so from a revenue and profit perspective, but also in the purpose, whether it's starting as a benefit corporation or getting certified as a B Corp, or having some purpose ingrained within their business model and in their activities as part of the startup venture. And so that's been my focus here over the last few years. And actually, I guess maybe one other thing to mention is that 2 weeks ago, I started teaching a leadership development class at the University of New Mexico Anderson School of Management. So very excited about that, to begin working with students as well.
I'd love to have a chat to you about that at some point, Jon. That sounds very interesting. So you talk about purposeful leadership. You talk about businesses being very clear about their purpose and leading for impact. Tell us more about why you think that is so important.
Yeah, I'll start with kind of 2 thoughts around that. One is, I think that, it was the original intent, I guess, if you will. So Adam Smith, who is viewed as being kind of the father of capitalism, if you will, he talked a lot in the book around moral sentiments about how decisions or we need to take into account those that our decisions impact, so that there is, he didn't use the word empathy, but essentially, understanding how our business decisions or how our other decisions are going to impact people in society. And so there's definitely a purpose embedded from the beginning as far as what business should do beyond just making a profit and growing revenue. I think the second part is that, especially, maybe this is more U.S. based, but there's definitely issues in other countries as well that some of our politics and our government seems to be somewhat paralyzed on addressing issues that impact the long term, the future of our globe, our planet, and just certain issues that have gone unresolved for so long. And so business leaders have shown that they can step up and fill that void, that they can take actions that can improve our planet or address climate in a positive way, as well as diversity and inclusion and discrimination and all those other types of tough issues. And so I think if in that void, somebody's got to step up. And the business leaders are starting to do that. And I think we're going to see more of that. And they can hopefully over time too also hold the politicians more accountable to their decisions and actions or inactions, so that we can get better balance between business and society, or business and politics again as well.
There's a few things I'd like to unpack there, Jon. Really interesting perspectives. The first one you brought up was the word capitalism. And I'm going to say that many people, when they think of capitalism, they have pictures of Gordon Gekko on the famous Wall Street movie, and they think of greed, and they think of the famous words, greed is good, etc. And certainly that is a perspective that still exists for some, that capitalism equals greed. But what I'm hearing you say is that the original intent of capitalism was not that. It was actually about having impact. Tell us more on that.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I think, again, if greed is good, then purpose is engaging. And that should be more of a balanced effort, I guess, within businesses. And so, yeah, back in, at least some of my research, I guess, around Adam Smith, he had this concept of sympathy. So again, empathy, at least that word or that concept didn't exist back in those days. And it wasn't being sympathetic to somebody necessarily, but it was, again, like I mentioned, being able to put yourself in their place and try to understand the impact of a decision was going to have on them. It's easy for us to obviously think about the impact of a decision on ourselves. I think it's more challenging to think about that impact on someone else. And he also used this concept kind of imagination. Some may call it moral imagination. And it is, using this concept of an impartial spectator. So if I can't think of an individual that's different from me, where my decision is impacting them, then I can kind of create this spectator and imagine what that impact would be. And so again, I think, obviously, Adam Smith wrote 2 books, Wealth of Nations and Moral Sentiments, and a lot of the attention has focused on Wealth of Nations. And Milton Friedman, the University of Chicago economist, kind of took a thread of, if you will, in my opinion, of Wealth of Nations and kind of ran with it. And that kind of created this shareholder capitalism view for many years. I think what gives me hope on the stakeholder capitalism side of things is that, it took probably about 20 years for shareholder capitalism to really take hold and change the way businesses and operated within our society. And so with stakeholder capitalism, we're probably only, 5 years into it, if you will. So, it's easy to get discouraged, maybe not to see as much positive traction, but I think there is reasonable traction, and I think there's a lot more to come. So knowing that it took a while for shareholder capitalism to take hold, we still have a ways ahead to really get stakeholder capitalism to show more results and get more people on the board to join that momentum that not only do consumers want, I believe, but I believe the next generation of business leaders really want to try to manage and lead that way as well.
I like this pivot and this conversation that we're having here, Jon, and the difference between shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism. So we think of shareholder capitalism about being a return on investment, a fiscal return on investment, earnings per share, and the bottom line, and all of these things. What's your definition of stakeholder capitalism?
Yeah, it's a broader view. So yes, shareholders are important, and profit is important, and all the operational and financial aspects of a business. Because without that, obviously you're not going to be able to operate. But as important are the employees, your partners, your customers, the citizens in your communities. Each of them play a role within your company as well. And so it takes an added effort from a leadership perspective to understand some of the different perspectives of those key stakeholders on a decision or a direction of a company. But when they do, I think, at least I don't have all the statistics off the top of my head, but I know there's been some research done where if there's more of a focus on those types of elements, that they're as financially successful, if not more so, than ones that are just focused on shareholder capitalism. And I think just from, if not to go off on a tangent too much, but, as it relates to shareholder capitalism, unfortunately, I think one of the things that kind of took hold, especially over the last decade or so, is almost this kind of hero CEO or hero leaders that we need to pay somebody a lot of money because they know what they're doing and they're going to take the company in this better direction than anybody else could. And so, we've got now this, especially in the United States, this CEO to worker pay discrepancy. It's 250 to or 300 to 1, and that not having more of a 50 to 1 or 100 to 1 type ratio, that creates a lot of inequity within our society, let alone our businesses. And so there needs to be some readjustments, some hard ones that are going to need to happen, and we're going to need boards and governance to take better hold of that and to try to shift things to where it's more reasonable. In other countries like UK or Germany, I know the ratios are more in that kind of 50 to 100 to 1 ratio. And so there's definitely going to be some hard turning points that need to happen to really have stakeholder capitalism take hold. And this is where real leadership, if you will, needs to step up, and real governance needs to step up as well.
Mm. I think when we get to those levels, those multiples that you're talking about, it becomes very difficult for self-interest not to overtake collective interest. I think that's part of the issue there. Coming back to your point about the financial performance, I think the other part between shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism would be that with a sole focus on shareholder returns, that you can end up in a situation where the business is making short-term decisions. What is it that keeps the share price up? Is it our quarter-end results? Is it our year-end results, etc.? Whereas a stakeholder capitalism approach is most likely going to have a better long-term vision and make better long-term decisions that result in the longevity of the business and the long-term profitability of the business. That's where I think the secret is. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely agree. And then if you listen to some of the conversations that the Business Roundtable has had, so Business Roundtable represents about 200 of largest corporations, and they issued a statement about 18 months ago or so about the focus of a corporation should be on stakeholders, not just shareholders. And if you listen or read about some of the commentary and how that transition is going, I guess, it is about short-termism versus long-termism. And so I think the Business Roundtable leaders understand the importance of having a longer-term vision and direction for a company is going to build more shareholder value, but it's also going to probably build greater employee engagement. Kind of going back to the point of employee engagement being extremely low. Making decisions more for the long term should also impact employee engagement. and because it's going to build, hopefully, well, I guess there's two parts to that. One is that, as a business leader, if you're going to focus more on the long term, you really need to have the vision that there's different stakeholders that have collaborated on, agree on, and know that, and are inspired by that vision, and really willing to do the work to achieve that longer term vision. So trust is, I think, part of that. And then with trust, then I think, at least from research I've read, where there is a high trust organization, engagement is in the 70s, not the 30s. And so, when there is that trusted relationship between the leaders and the workers, or among the stakeholders for a company, knowing and inspired by that longer term vision, they'll get better engagement within the company, which would lead to better productivity, which would, likely lead to better financial performance as well.
You're saying so many things there that resonate so strongly with us at the Leadership Project, and with me personally. I have to say, Jon, the employee engagement part, the first thing I want to say to all of the business leaders listening to this podcast is, for any business to have real impact on the world, whether it be societal impact or even just your profits and your bottom line, you need to be able to scale. The only way that you can scale is through strong employee engagement with employees that are highly motivated, very engaged in the business, and very productive. The one CEO getting the big salary that Jon was talking about before cannot achieve any of the things that they achieve without an engaged workforce. And what I'm feeling more and more every day, Jon, is that people want to work for organizations that have a clear purpose and make a real impact on the world. I study heavily millennials and Gen Y and Gen Z people. I'm a Gen X myself. I already had that in me. I want to work for a company that is very purpose driven. But I think as the generations go, that is dramatically increasing, with millennials and Gen Z being their number one criteria is to work for a company with purpose, and other things come second. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the studies from the Edelman Trust Barometer, definitely back that up. I mean, not only do they want to work for those types of companies, they expect business leaders to deliver more than profit. They want them to deliver societal good as well. And so I think you're right. Both millennials and Gen Z are wanting to see those changes happen. Millennials are becoming more and more in leadership positions, and my hope is that we'll begin to see more tangible efforts in that. If you look at, here with the pandemic, there's been some discussions about the Great Resignation, right? About people not or leaving their jobs. I mean, I think in May alone in the United States, there was like, I think 5 or 6 million people left their jobs in May just alone. And if you look at some of the statistics right now, anyway, part of it is, relating to the work conditions, what kind of flexibility team members want in between their work and life. And I think there is purpose. I think it seems to be a strong thread within that as well. Not only what individuals want out of how they spend their time at work, but also I think the types of companies that they, want to work for and with. Pay is definitely a part of it, but I think, work flexibility is a part of it. But I think it's probably more than that too, that they really want to work for an organization that that they can trust, and that they're a trusted part of that organization as well. So I think, to a certain degree, it goes back to stakeholder capitalism in the sense that, if you're going to have more holistic leadership, leaders that understand the different perspectives of different stakeholders, and are able to work through those tensions and those challenges and do it in a way that, you're never going to make everybody happy, but if most people understand why those decisions are being made and how those tensions are resolved, and it fits with a vision of profit and purpose, then I think most would probably, get on board with that type of approach and want to be with that type of company as well.
You've brought up the word trust several times already. Tell us about the connection between purpose and trust.
Yeah, I think there's, you can look at it as self-trust maybe first. I mean, that's probably a good place to begin. I mean, I think as an individual leader or contributor or team member, you have to have a certain confidence in what resonates with you, what's important to you, and how you want to show up in the workplace and in community and family life, and in contributing in a positive way. I think there was an article written about enemies of trust, and it referred to kind of three areas of trust. There was, let me see if I remember them all now, but it was organizational trust, there was strategic trust, and I believe it was kind of that personal trust as well. And so, going back to the importance of having an inspiring vision, so that's kind of the strategic trust, right? Do you really believe in what the business leaders are saying about where they want to take the organization, and is that something you want to be a part of? I think the organizational trust obviously is equally important part of that because that's really the organizational culture, right? And if you don't trust that it's going to be an equitable, fair, engaging, collaborative, type organizational culture, then yeah, you're probably going to be one of those, 60, 70% that are somewhat disengaged or very disengaged within that organization, which isn't healthy for anybody in that situation. So, you know, so I think, again, I think you have to look at it in a whole trust in a holistic way that you do have to have a certain amount of self-trust, but then you need to have trust within the organization that you're working with and working for, or that you're building as a leader, as well as then the direction of that organization as well.
So let me try and pull some of those threads together, and I'd like your feedback on this summary. So people want to work for a company with purpose. They want to feel that what they do is having a meaningful impact and that what they do matters. Building and maintaining trust is then having a company that not only has that purpose and has that vision, but they live that purpose and they live that vision, and that the actions that they make on a day-to-day business basis are consistent with the values, beliefs, purpose, and vision of the company. And whenever the actions do not match, that kills trust. And when the actions do match, it builds trust. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it goes to credibility, right? If you're going to be a credible leader or a credible organization, you have to, live your values. You got to lead with that. If team members see an inconsistency or customers see an inconsistency, or a shallowness of it, they're going to call you out. That's maybe one of the few benefits of social media these days is that it enables employees and others to have more an active voice in holding business leaders accountable. So if they're talking about, diversity and inclusion, but their actions aren't showing that, you know, the employees today are going to speak up and stand up or walk out, as in the case with Google a couple of years ago. So, I think, that kind of, in my opinion, kind of goes back to stakeholder capitalism again. Employees and other stakeholders have a real voice in guiding and holding businesses accountable, to stakeholder capitalism. If I'm a company, a Fortune 500 company that says, yes, I'm adopting uh, stakeholder capitalism, and they're not, then the employees, the customers, the shareholders too, now can step up and voice their opinion. And we're starting to see more of that, I think, with around the ESG type things, both from an investor standpoint as well as what individuals are looking for in other organizations. But I think, again, not to get off on a tangent, but I think it's easy to forget the G in ESG, right, which is the governance side of it. And so as a business leader, you need to be cognizant of that. You need to, think of all stakeholders. So shareholders don't necessarily take on a lesser role if you're pursuing stakeholder capitalism, but it's more of a balanced view. And so the point being is that, my hope is, I guess, that we'll see stronger governance within many companies, as well as among the stakeholders, to keep business leaders honest in their values that they're stating, either as part of their company direction and purpose or even their individual values that they're trying to live out and how they lead.
Nice summary there, John. And don't be concerned about tangents. People that listen to this show often will know that I love tangents, and they're really good. So
that's where you get to explore the edges of things.
Exactly. And I'm always looking to have more challenging and thought-provoking conversations. So thank you for that. Some things that I picked up from what you said. In the age of social media, everyone does have a voice and everyone does have a platform now to be able to get that voice heard. That does have the ability to build up more openness and transparency, which I think can be a very good thing. There are some things about social media that we've spoken about on the show that are not as good, things like comparison, things like algorithmic bias, etc. But having platforms for openness and transparency, I think, is a good thing. And then the knock-on effect of that, when we talk about trust and anything that kills trust, then you'll find employees voting with their voice, voting with their feet as they leave the organization, and you'll have customers voting with their wallets if they see a company that says one thing and does another. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we already have seen that, both from a customer's perspective as well as employee perspective as well. I mean, when it's a smaller company, but it's a good example. So there's a company called Basecamp, and I think it was 3-4 months ago where they kind of dictated a policy of no more discussion of politics or other issues. Focus on your business. The companies should not be involved in or don't have a social impact is kind of essentially the message that they sent. And at least from what I've read, I think close to half the people of the company left after that, or they were given an opportunity maybe, to get packages, whatever, to do that if they don't agree with that. To me, it was just disappointing for a number of reasons. One is, Jason Fried, is an author and the head of that company, and had been kind of recognized, I think, as generally a progressive business leader. And so it was somewhat surprising to see that type of pronouncement. But in my opinion, it was short-sighted. I mean, every company has a social impact, whether they want to admit it or not. How you pay and treat people has a social impact. If you're not treated well or paid well, guess what? That's going to impact your family life when you go home. It's going to impact how you deal with your neighbors or get to know your neighbors or not. If you're not happy and satisfied and fulfilled at work, it's going to impact how you feel when you go home and in your communities where you live. And so every company has a social impact, in my opinion. And again, as we've talked already, that some companies are stepping up more to have more of a social impact, whether it's on the environment or on diversity and inclusion type of issues. So, to me, the base level social impact of any company is how you treat and pay people in a equitable and fair way, and that's the low bar. Everything above that, we should do more than just that, and many business leaders are starting to do that. But to say that a company doesn't have a social impact is just it is nonsense.
That was a nice example that you gave there. And I think it's a good opportunity to segue back to one of the first things that you said. You've had a career where you have started out in politics and then moved out into commercial world. You've also said that business leaders are better positioned to have societal impact than politicians. Can you explain that a little further?
Sure. So 2 points, I guess, before getting into that. One is that businesses have always been involved in politics. It was just a little bit more hidden in the sense that it was lobbying dollars or hiring lobbyists to take on issues and try to, get government to do things that were positive for that business. So, the notion that businesses shouldn't be involved in politics, if that's true, then, we need to change a lot of laws because it's been happening for decades. secondly is that, at least here in the United States, there's a great book written that's called We the Corporations by Adam Winkler, who's a UCLA law professor. And it talks about how corporations got civil rights in the United States long before blacks, women, other minority groups. And so, in my view, with those civil rights come responsibilities. And so, business leaders need to step up. I think the other part that's kind of missed in a lot of the conversations is that, again, going back to stakeholders in particular, well, all of them really, but customers and employees, they're citizens of different communities. And if there's laws or regulations that are negatively impacting them and their families, then the business leaders should do something to try to address that. There's been examples of, where some states tried to pass gender discrimination laws um, or, other things that kind of limited, someone's right and freedoms. And business leaders stood up and, were largely successful in stopping a lot of those or overturning some of those state laws and regulations from taking effect. And so I think, going back to kind of empathy or thinking about our decisions and how they impact others, we need to think more about that. Unfortunately, empathy seems to just to become, I should just understand the people that are like me, not the people that are unlike me. And that's not empathy at all. And that's definitely not what Adam Smith talked about as far as being the impartial spectator. We should be thinking about people unlike us and the impact of those decisions that we are making on them. And if we do that, then, I don't know if I'm making up this word or not, but I call it integrative empathy. We need to have more of that rather than just trying to cater to those that are like us.
Even if it is a made up word, I love it, John. I love everything you just said. What I'm hearing is the need for lobbying for the right reasons. So instead of lobbying for something that is generating profits for the company, lobbying for things that stand up for the rights of your people, caring for your people, truly caring for your people. And beyond that, with your integrative empathy, caring for those that may not have the power to care for themselves. So speaking up for the people that don't have a strong voice in the community.
Absolutely. I think just like we were talking about earlier, that companies having a social impact, and as far as how you treat them and pay them within within your business, it's the other way around too. So in society, if certain of your employees are feeling like they can't be who they are, they can't love who they want to love, whatever the case may be, they're not going to be, they're going to feel threatened. They're going to feel that they can't be the type of person, type of leader within, whether it's in their neighborhoods or even within their company. My point is that it kind of flows the other way. And so, business leaders, I think some maybe understand that if there's negative state and national regulation on certain types of citizens within communities, that's going to impact them at work. And so, and then also to your point that, if the business leader has a bigger voice and can help prevent some of that versus, the impact on that individual, then, it's the right thing to do regardless, but it also probably makes good business sense to do it too, because by not having a threatened employee, they're going to feel more engaged, more willing to be themselves and to contribute more fully within their company as well.
So standing up for what's right, doing what's right, standing up for what's right, but then having a positive business impact as a result anyway.